Great.
Good
Hi,
morning.
hello.
Yes, good morning. It is 11 o'clock, so we will call our meeting to order. This is a special called meeting of the School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council. Thank you to each of you for taking time out of your busy schedule. For all of us in the school world, this might quite possibly be the busiest time of the school year. So thank you for taking time out of your day to join us to hear these important legislative updates and how these updates are going to impact our council. So at this time, I will ask Jessica to please take the roll call of members.
Thank you. Before I can take roll, I'd like to review some information for members about conducting meetings in a virtual setting. This virtual meeting must comply with the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. The public may view the meeting during via the link provided in the public agenda, which is also posted on the KDE website. SCAAC members must ensure that their video is working and they can be seen throughout the duration of the meeting. Additionally, all discussions must be broadcast to the public. Each time you do speak during the meeting, please unmute your mic, state your name, and take a short pause. This will give the software time to recognize you. For agenda items that require a formal vote, we won't have any, I don't think this session. Please silence or turn off any other electronic devices that may cause a disruption to your sound feed, and minutes will be taken and shared with the general public on the KDE website when they become available. So now I'll call roll. Members, when I call your name, please make sure your camera and mic are on, state your full name, and indicate that you are present. There are 9 members needed for a quorum. Deborah Atherton. I think we saw Deborah. Oh. Okay. Carrie Ballinger.
Present.
Martha Emmons is not present. Chuck Fletcher.
Present.
Thank you. Jana Beth Francis.
Present.
Frank Hall. See Frank, I think. Oh, I see Deborah now. Hi, Deborah. Hi. Leslie Jeffries. Nicola Mason.
Nicola Mason, present.
Thank you. Brenda McGowan has said she won't make it. Allison Tammy. Josh Tropsper.
Josh Trosper, present.
Robert Tuck.
Robert Tuck, present.
Sarah Williams.
Sarah Williams, present.
Alan Young.
Alan Young, present.
Thank you. And Rosemary Young.
Rosa Young, present.
Thank you so much. It looks like we have quorum. You can take it away, Carrie.
Jessica. Yes, thank you, Jessica, for that. Following on our agenda, we have legislative updates on House Bill 257, House Bill 10, and Senate Bill 197. And joining us today to provide updates on those legislative actions are Ms. Jennifer Stafford, Shara Savage, and Melissa Chandler. So I will turn it over to them to provide updates on those legislative measures.
Thank you, Dr. Ballinger, and good morning, everyone. I just also want to thank you very much for spending the next 2 hours with us in discussion of the legislation that has impacted our schools and districts. And we know that it is a busy time, the end of the school year. Testing is wrapping up rapidly. It's gone well this spring, and we've got lots of celebrations going on in our schools with award ceremonies and graduation. So we really appreciate you spending the morning with us, talking about some upcoming and some exciting discussions as we move forward with implementing legislation from the 26th legislative session. We're going to start with an update on Senate Bill 197. Then Cheryl's going to provide us a overview of the changes to the state accountability that meets federal requirements as part of House Bill 257. And then just update you on a new process of confirmation of our chairs from House Bill 10 that does include the chair of our School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council, as well as the Kentucky Board of Education. And so we just want to make you aware of that change that is upcoming. So I'm going to start and then with the impact of legislative changes on our Kentucky college admissions exam. So if you'll go to the next slide. On literally the last day of the legislative session, on April 15th, a new section 15, was added to Senate Bill 197. And that new section called for a new procurement bid for our college entrance exam, as well as it placed limitations on the use of funds. So on the slide, what you can see is the draft or the bill, Senate Bill 197, that was adopted by the General Assembly. So you can see that there was information that limits the use of funds, that it has the college admissions exam or the college entrance exam had to be aligned to the Kentucky academic standards, and we had to go through a new procurement process. Now, I'll remind you that our current college admissions exam, we went through the procurement process. We started that process in 2023, and it took a bit of time to get that RFP or request for proposal, that procurement process in place. And we awarded the College Board the college admissions exam for the SAT to be administered this for the spring of 2026. So we went through that national or that search for a company that had a college admissions exam, and the College Board was awarded that contract. Now, I'll note for you here that because it is a national product, it's a national assessment that is given. We've given the ACT in the past, and both the ACT and the SAT are developed using a variety of measures that include curriculum surveys across the nation. So it's not just a Kentucky-based assessment. It is a national assessment based on their development of their college readiness standards, or that align to the blueprint of that the companies have created. Our Kentucky summative assessment meets the criteria for a test based on the Kentucky academic standards. So we were able to provide that information. And if you'll go to the next slide, we were able to provide that information. And on April 27, the governor used his line item veto to veto out the part of the statute around the limitation of use of the general funds. So what you see on the slide is the portion of the statute that is remaining. So you see that the Kentucky Department of Education shall initiate a new competitive bid for that college admissions exam. So just I want to provide that update and know that Kentucky, the Department of Education, we have followed all of the statutes and guidelines of that procurement that solidified that contract for College Board for administration of the SAT. So there was no question about the process that was used or the legitimacy of the contract. It was just that they want us to go back and do it again. So I want you to know that KDE will follow all the guidelines for the Model Procurement Code 45A, as we did last time, and have an unbiased, effective, and efficient procurement process. Now, if we'll go to the next slide, I have one more. And then I see a couple of hands raised. So just the timeline for this college admissions exam will lead us into the new school year for 26-27 without knowing which college admissions exam will be administered in the spring of 2027, because the statute did say that it was for implementation in the 26-27 school year. So that brings a lot of uncertainty. It brings uncertainty for our students, for our educators, for our families. We understand that. And KDE is working diligently with the Finance and Administration Cabinet on this procurement process. And we're hoping to have it as soon as possible, but it will be more toward the fall. When we do talk to the Finance Administration Cabinet, they said the soonest possible that we could have a contract is October. And that's an aggressive goal to have it in October, I will say, because it generally takes about 18 months to go through the procurement process. So I see our commissioner, Dr. Fletcher, would you like to add, please?
I just wanted to emphasize the how we understand that this puts everyone at a strain. I'm talking about all of our districts, all of our students, our families, especially to start the school year not knowing which college entrance exam it would be. As Dr. Stafford pointed out, we are working with the with OSBD and others to make sure we get through this process as quickly as possible. But at the earliest, we've been told to go through the procurement process and working with the Finance Administration Cabinet. You're looking at maybe at the earliest October before we'll be able to name the vendor for next year. So that's at the earliest. And that's if everything goes smoothly, no protests, things of that nature, then October would be the earliest we can get that out. So I wanted to make sure that we got that out to you. And again, want to emphasize that this was a complete surprise to us. On the last day, that language was added in. I also want to emphasize that we sent to the governor the exact veto language. And then he did the line item veto part of it, not the entirety of it. So it does require us to go back through the procurement process. So we got two surprises as we went through, one from the legislators and then also one from the governor's office. With that being said, we will do our best to work with the governor's office to make sure that we get through this. First of all, we want to make sure it's fair. We want to make sure we follow the process. We're going to follow all the steps and be as efficient as possible. But again, the earliest will be October, and that is the earliest before we'll be able to name a vendor going through this process. So thank you, Dr. Stafford.
Thank you. I think we have another hand up.
Yes, I think it's Josh.
Good morning, Josh.
Good morning, Josh Trosper, Assistant Principal, Knox Central, down here in southeastern Kentucky. I had just kind of I had a point and then a question, but all the feedback, I just wanted to share, all the feedback that I've received from our staff on administering the SAT was that it was a wonderful, it was a wonderful way to give a test. Everybody was very, very supportive of the SAT and said that it was a very easy process. But my second question was on the funding part, is there a risk that either the SAT or ACT would not fulfill that Kentucky standard and the general fund would not pay for that? Is that a risk?
So that part of the legislation was removed. So Jessica, if you'll go back to slide 4. So slide 4 had the limitation on the general funds. So you can see here slides, or not slide, but lines 4 through that first part of 8. So you see that is the sentence that limited the funds, that it should, any contract that does not meet Kentucky academic standards outlined is not used. But if you'll go to the next slide, on slide 5, Governor Beshear took out those first lines that included that limitation on the general fund. So, so following statute, we will go through the procurement process and we will secure a contract for the college admissions exam again.
Okay, I apologize. I didn't realize that the veto had not been overridden. I got you.
So
Apologies.
yes,
Yeah, when
so
this passed, there was an opportunity for the veto to be overridden, so it couldn't be. After it was done after that veto period, the 10-day window, it was done after that. Well, it was done on the very last day, April 15th. So, the governor then had 10 days to veto, and then they wouldn't be in session to veto it after that.
thank
I'm sorry,
you.
to override the veto. I apologize.
Janet Beth?
So I just want to echo what's been said about the ease of the SAT. And I also want to commend KDE for your continued support of this. This has not been an easy transition, but I want to publicly state that I think this is an example of people making decisions that are maybe not in best interest of Kentucky public schools, because yesterday was the information session from SAT that we could sign up to learn how to use all of our results. And I think it has a real potential to influence academics in Kentucky. And so I understand the position you all are in. And at the end of the day, we all know there are 2 primary college entrance exams. And I think it's going to put a lot of professional learning on hold. And we are trying to decide what to do with our seniors in terms of making sure they're college and career ready. And I know we can use either assessment, but it's a very frustrating time. And I just want to echo the statement that really, from a student and a teacher use, the SAT was wonderful.
We appreciate those comments, and we, again, we do understand the position that puts everyone in the education world, and we will do everything that we can to get a contract in place. And our goal is to have a college admissions exam to be administered for our seniors, or for our juniors, in the spring of 2027. So that is definitely our goal, so that those students don't miss their opportunity. Roseberry, I see your hand up. And you may be muted.
Thank you. Can I ask what the approximate cost of this will be?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we went through the procurement process, and with the College Board contract, we were saving annually $350,000 compared to what we were paying previously with the ACT. And now I'll note for you that contract that we have with the College Board was a 9-year contract. So for the next 8 years, because we gave one administration this year, we have had a contract in place that would administer the SAT for the next 8 years. And I'll even note this for you, that it was going to be an increasing savings for the College Board, because the the bid that ACT put in had the cost increasing in those latter years, where SAT and the College Board kept it flat. So we were saving 350,000 for the first 4 years, and then that was an increase in savings in those latter years.
So is there any issue with not keeping that contract in place?
Legally, that's a good question as well. In all of KDE's contracts, there is a clause that says that we can terminate any contract within 30 days. And our vendors, they sign that knowing that's a possibility.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions before I turn it over to Shara? Okay, all right. Shara is going to bring us just highlights of Senate Bill 257, and this is our Kentucky United We Learn bill that we were advocating for and did a lot of work on. We didn't get it completely where we wanted, but we got a lot of positive movement toward our goal in Kentucky. So I'll turn it over to Shara.
Thank you, Jennifer. So next slide, please. As you may have already heard, last month, the bill to reimagine Kentucky's state assessment accountability systems was passed and signed by the governor. So like Jennifer said, we didn't hit the moon shot that we were aiming for, but this does get us a step closer. So next slide, please. So House Bill 257, it provides an opportunity for our districts to adopt locally developed indicators of quality. These measures that districts can create or adopt are still aligned to Kentucky's academic standards, but allows for students to demonstrate their learning in a more of a real way versus, standard assessments. This could include, school safety or other local priorities that matter to the community. The bill also defines vibrant learning, which is really about student-centered experiences in which students can apply their learning through projects and partnerships with families and communities that align to their interest or future career goals. Districts are not required to implement a local system that includes these indicators, but may choose to do so. But the important piece here is if they do choose to implement this, there are a few requirements such as disaggregated student data and making those results public and available online. So KDE, we will support this work through technical assistance and may offer a one-time payment of up to $15,000 to help get districts get started. All right, next slide, please. So this section of the bill focuses on additional measures that reflect both educator quality and student readiness at key transition points. So the first is it measures a percentage of certified teachers who have advanced credentials, such as rank 1 or the national board certification. It also includes at the middle school the percentage of students earning a high school credit by grade 8. And then at the high school level, it focuses on the FAFSA completion, recognizing that those students who complete the application or those who the family formally opts out. And then, so next slide, please. So during this year, the 26 school year. So we're almost at the end of the school year. And so I'm sure that most have almost completed their spring testing for 26. But still want to emphasize that there was no changes made to the grade levels or the content areas. Students continue to be assessed in reading, mathematics, science, and social studies, writing, including editing and mechanics, and on-demand writing was also still in place, along with that quality school climate and safety survey. And likewise, the alternate Kentucky summative assessment, that testing also remained the same for this spring, for spring 2026. Then what I will note for you here is this fall for data reporting for fall 26, that will remain unchanged. So we will still continue to use status and change in accountability and reporting for this year. And when we do data reporting in the fall, that will still include status and change. State calculations with status and change will continue to determine those school color ratings. Federal classifications for the 3-year average will continue to determine classifications such as CSI, TSI, and ATSI. Overall, the message I want to share with you today here is for this year, we are emphasizing stability. So there's no immediate changes that were made to the assessments nor the accountability for this spring. This allows districts to continue the work with confidence. All right, so next slide, please. So looking ahead at the 26-27 school year, changes, you'll start to see those changes. So for the Kentucky Summative Assessment, while testing does continue with the same grade levels, there are some key changes and components being removed from the state testing program. This includes editing and mechanics, on-demand writing, and that quality of school climate and safety survey. For the alternate Kentucky Summative Assessments, we also see changes with the writing and the survey being removed. Writing is still important to us, and writing continues to be emphasized. Each superintendent must adopt and publish a writing program that includes writing across the curriculum. KDE must provide, as part of that bill, school and districts with guidelines and professional learning opportunities to support that writing across the curriculum. In addition to the assessment changes, there are important updates on the accountability side of things. So in 26-27 school year, the chronic absenteeism will be introduced as a new indicator. Growth will be a new indicator, and change will be removed. So this marks a shift in how we define and measure success here in Kentucky. What I do want to bring to your attention and make you aware of is the contract for the KSA and AKSA will also be out for bid, which could affect future administrations in the 28 and beyond school years. So with that, next slide, please. So it's important to remember that Kentucky's accountability system is shaped both in the state and federal law. So under the federal requirements, states must measure academic achievement in reading and mathematics, in growth or other academic indicators, also in progress in English language proficiency, graduation rate, and at least one school quality and student success indicator. Often you'll hear us refer to that as the SQSS. Okay, so next slide, please.
Share, before we go on, I think we have a couple questions.
Oh, got a couple. Okay, got a question. Okay, I'll stop right there.
Yep. Let's see, Dr. Mason.
Thank you, Carrie. Hi, Shara. So just related to the chronic absenteeism, schools
Mhm.
have limited control over absenteeism.
Yes.
I think
Mhm.
having accountability measurement tied to that variable could potentially be looked at as somewhat of a discriminative variable in select school districts. I think as I recall, there's already a funding penalty related to absenteeism. So this kind of feels like a bit of a double whammy in some way. And then I think there's just a general fear that we're going to push a lot of communities and families into more homeschooling if absenteeism is an indicator. I just wonder if instead of including this as a variable in accountability or in the accountability model, we could utilize some of those same resources for methods to help solve some of the chronic absenteeism instead of perhaps taking more of a punitive approach.
Sarah, I'll add some with that.
Okay,
I agree with everything that was said. Thank you so much for adding that. One of the things that when we talked to legislators, of course, we took the full proposal for the Kentucky and Ivy Learn Council, what we talked about here at SCAAC, also from our board. And when we met with them, we talked about, already you have districts that their funding is based on ADA, average daily attendance. We talked about, how students go to homeschool. We push a lot on that, on absenteeism and truancy and things of that matter. Of course, truancy and chronic absenteeism are a little different, but as far as chronic absenteeism, the argument that was used was 36 states use chronic absenteeism as a part of their assessment or their accountability system. Again, we present the argument, but as far as the bill itself, that was added in. It would be interesting to see what type of measures that we could include, or even, I think the survey before, and Shara, please correct me if I'm wrong, I think the climate safety survey was 4% of the
Yes.
overall model.
Mhm,
So
4%.
what percentage would we want to even include chronic absenteeism? So it could be a very small percentage, much like the safety survey also too. But again, agree with your points. So just want to make sure we emphasize that for you.
Right. And then we do have a couple more slides in the presentation to kind of share with you some thoughts from another group that we spoke with this week. And so more to come on that. And I think
Sarah, did you have a question as well?
I do. I had, Dr. Fletcher had explained earlier, maybe several months ago, about how for science and social studies would be moved to 5th grade unless you chose to use your local accountability assessments. And so I was just kind of wondering, did that stay? Did that change for the elementary?
the grade levels did not change, so they're still the same. Those did not change. And I see somebody else has their hand up.
Alan, do you have a question for us today?
Yes, I've got a few. So with the writing program, or the writing, excuse me, being now across subject areas and so forth, I thought Sheriff said something that the district had to adopt a writing program. Are districts not allowed to demonstrate the way they and create the way they want to show writing across different subject areas and so forth? Or must they adopt some kind of purchase program?
I'll take an attempt at that one too. They do not have to purchase some type of program. They need to have a policy, an SBDM policy that emphasizes writing across the curriculum. Now, how they want to assess that, That is something that's up to the district on how they would want to do that. But again, there's not a prescribed program, but there will be, we will have, templates of policies. We'll work with KSBA to make sure that there's things out there for sample policies for writing across the curriculum, but it's not here's a program, implement it type of thing. No.
Right.
I hope that
Perfect.
helps, Shara.
Oh,
Anything I
it
need to
sure
add
does.
there?
I appreciate that.
Okay,
And
good.
it sounds like you're suggesting it goes via our SBDM. Is that a school by school thing then? Or is it really that a district, I'm in Jefferson County, where we have about 150 schools, could come up with some guidance on how to help, along with the state, how to help each individual school do this? Or can the school district itself have some, at least, options that maybe SBDMs might choose or something?
If I'm not mistaken, I'll go back and review this, and please share, correct me if I'm wrong, that originally it was more, they had in there that it's still school-based policy, but it goes back to align with the practice of having a superintendent approve that policy as they move forward. Now, again, that's loosely describing that, but again, it's more in line with how site-based policies are implemented now as is.
I think
So-
you're right, Dr. Fletcher.
Thank you.
And do you know, with the other laws that sometimes appear to give two superintendents maybe more power in the state than others, how that might be affecting this with regard to SBDMs, if it's a superintendent's choice, or is it still SBDM in Jefferson and Fayette?
I'll tell you what, I'll look up the actual 257 and see what the language is, and I'll have Dr. Stafford and Ms. Savage, if they'll send it out to you, we'll make sure we get that to you. But I
Sure.
believe it aligns with just the current site-based policies. Dr. Stafford, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, sure. I have, while we've been talking, Alan, thanks for the question. I pulled up 257 and I'll just read, and I apologize for reading, but I just want you to hear the specific words that was adopted. And it says each superintendent of a local school district shall adopt policies that determine the writing program for the local school district and ensure the writing program policy is published on the district's website. Though it goes on to say the writing program shall include disciplinary specific writing across the curriculum and incorporate a variety of language resources, technological tools, and multiple opportunities for students to develop complex communication skills.
Okay.
And originally that was in SBDM policy. That was a change as we went through, I believe. I think there was an amendment there as they went through and changed it to have the superintendent, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Jennifer?
It does say each superintendent of a local school district.
And I have another question about another area with the change to chronic absenteeism away from the school climate and safety survey. Is it possible, or I don't know if it is desirable, and if places would, I'm not speaking here for anybody, but is it possible that the school climate and safety survey could be used by a district as part of their local accountability to be able to show other things that they think might give a broader perspective than simply chronic absenteeism?
Absolutely. We have currently on our KDE website the links to the climate and safety survey that is administered to our students. So those are public. Those can be utilized now. And so we have those available to all schools and districts across the state and nation if they want to use that.
And then kind of as a little bit of a follow-up, I noticed that you mentioned SQSS, which uses not safety, but student success as something as part of the federal requirement, which seems to me would allow for an expansion of lots of different measures that could be used, especially under our competency-based systems, like in our Portrait of a Learner, whether it's the KBE or over 160 districts, I think, now have their own portraits of a learner that are really probably more success indicators. Do you know if there are any kinds of movements to for a additional change for next year's legislative session to, if we can't just change it and not just have chronic absenteeism alone, but have something that's simply a more fuller measure of both, whether it's safety and or student success, be back added in. I'm just concerned that these elements that I think are so enriching for engagement and empowerment of students will be lost and diminished if they are not supported in legislation.
I'll tell you, again, I think that we would, only the way we could add that back in is if the legislature voted that back in. They were very clear that they did not want that to be a part of the system in the discussions. It was very clear in a lot of the discussions, they did not want that to be a part of it. As far as now again, if a district wants to use that as part of their local accountability model, absolutely. But the intent of the legislators that we worked with was that be removed.
Right, and
Thank you
so
so much.
as far as our school quality student success, we'll have multiple measures that fit into that requirement, that federal requirement, because we do have our other indicators such as post-secondary readiness and our state assessment results in science and social studies, that those also meet the criteria for that student success, school quality student success measure.
And I'm going to chime in very quickly here. I apologize to everyone, but I'm going to the graduation for the School for the Deaf. And so I'm going to be checking out here. But thank you to everyone. Thank you for your service. And again, I'm looking forward to working with SCAAC as we move forward, because we've got a line of, I want to thank Jennifer and her staff for, there is a timeline here of trying to get as much input from as many different advisory councils as possible before we move forward with growth, before we move forward with the ELL growth situation, things of that nature too. So I want just everybody on here, I want you to know, and I know you understand this, but Dr. Stafford and her team are doing a great job with getting as much input as possible to see what this growth model looks like in other areas too as we move forward. So thank you to each for serving, and thank you for all you do. And we'll go to Danville.
Thanks for being here and enjoy the graduation this afternoon.
Certainly.
So Alan, I want to bring up too, going back, I don't think Shara and I are the experts on SBDM policy. We
Right.
don't contend to be. But I just read to you the legislation, what it says, and in how SBDMs are supposed to work within the district policy, maybe to create their own writing policy. That could be that the board sets it, and then the SBDMs follow in that with their own. So just understand we're not the experts in that area. So if you would like us to, we can get you specific information, or we can reach out to another office who does deal with the SBDM.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it's probably got enough clarity right now, at least when it's got located and how you read it. We have our own folks, with SBDM thing, because it is complex in Jefferson County with all the different amounts of things, and how we often have a little bit of a two-step process. So it's not just freewheeling 150 different schools, whatever, but that we
Right.
have a way of having unity, but not necessarily uniformity, right? So that we can try to come up with some policy that way. And so it's been very helpful, I think, to at least see where that was located today. And it wasn't, at first I heard, not necessarily rightly, that we had to maybe purchase some standalone writing program, and we don't. It is allowed for us to create, and it's in the ballpark of doing this via the SBDM processes.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you for your feedback. Okay, so Jessica, if you could go to the next slide, please. So just to bring this around, and so with that federal requirements that we just shared with you, beginning in the 26-27 school year, Kentucky's accountability school year, Kentucky's accountability system, should I say, I'm sorry, will include a revised set of state indicators. These indicators focus on student performance in reading and mathematics, science and social studies achievement, individual student growth, English learner progress, and chronic absenteeism, post-secondary readiness, and our graduation rate. So there's different measures, and I'm going to be turning it over to Jennifer, who's going to be talking to you about individual student growth. Jennifer?
Thank you. Thank you. Jessica, if you will go back to slide 16, that's where I want to start with the conversation about individual student growth, because this slide demonstrates the federal requirements. So we've already talked a little bit about that school quality student success, but you see the other criteria, we call them buckets, if you will, that we have to meet federally. So the academic achievement in reading and math, the U.S. Department of Education through ESSA, they define achievement is reading and math only. So that piece of the science and social studies, it goes into either the other academic indicator, which is where it is now because we don't have growth, but because we're bringing individual student growth into the conversation, then that science and social studies would go into that school quality student success measure. So ESSA, that opened the door for another academic indicator. And for elementary and middle schools, that it has been predominantly in other states growth. And so we look at all the indicators together and to tell us about the student and actually the school. So this student growth measures are used to provide information that goes beyond just the proficiency or that academic piece. So you see here on this slide, we must bring together a state accountability system that meets the federal requirements of these buckets. But then Shara just showed you on slide 17, then all of the state requirements and those state pieces that are legislatively required. So this is the indicators that was approved by House Bill 257. So what we're here today is we want to gather your feedback and your opinions on these particular, in particular on student growth and chronic absenteeism. And then we'd like to spend some time with you about getting your values about the relative weights of all of these when they come together. And we've talked a little bit about the weights when they all come together and possibly that chronic absenteeism and where we are. But if looking at this slide, so what is required for growth? So federally, it again can be used as that other academic indicator. So student growth is measured by those peer-reviewed state assessments. So we currently have state assessments in reading and math in grades 3 through 8. And we have an indicator of at high school, or a measure of high school of reading and math at 10th grade. So you see here that high schools may include student growth measured by those state assessments. We've had a group, actually 2 groups. We've had an accountability thought partner group, and we've had a separate group with some overlap there about working on EL growth and how those two things play together. There has been some discussion about using a high school growth measure in Kentucky. So generally, we look at and define growth as that year-to-year measure, but we do have the opportunity at high school to do a skip year growth. So from 8th grade to 10th grade. So I'm going to say a little bit more about growth, but I'm going to ask you specifically about your thoughts about including individual student growth measure at high school using that 8th grade to 10th grade score in reading and math. So you be thinking about that as we go to the next slide. So just a little bit about student growth in the fact that it is a measure that gives different information to schools other than just the proficiency. Proficiency is, or that achievement is that single snapshot of the student performance on that state assessment. Student growth is a little bit different because it focuses on the individual student's progress from that one point of time, usually 1 year to the next, but could be from 8th grade to 10th grade. So it tracks how much progress the student makes over that period of time. Now, student growth also allows us to better recognize progress for students that haven't met that proficiency rate yet. So they haven't got to that level that we are striving for our students to achieve in proficiency or beyond. So allowing a student to demonstrate they haven't made it there yet, they haven't achieved that goal, but they're getting there, provides an opportunity for the school and the student to be recognized for their progress the student is making. It acknowledges that meaningful information because as we talk through our moonshot for the Kentucky United We Learn is to provide meaningful information. So these meaningful gains that the students makes toward that progress can be celebrated and included into an accountability system. So it really provides a more complete picture for what the school is doing by capturing that performance of the students that are, again, making those gains in the school that's helping those students get to that goal of proficiency. So it also gives insights to educators, it gives insights to families, students, the public, on how the school is effectively supporting their students in that learning for all students. So one of the values of growth is that for some schools that have low achieving schools, they are able to demonstrate that they have students that are, again, making that progress and demonstrating that strong growth because their students are making those substantial gains, even though they are at a lower starting point. So incorporating this into a accountability system really supports that vision that the Kentucky United We Learn Council had for including meaningful information, useful information, and again, supporting that continuous improvement and that continuous progress that we all want to see that drives our school improvement plans. All right, so with that, there's no single right answer. There's no single right growth model, if you will, that states utilize. It really depends on the values of your state as to which growth model that you would use. those decisions about which growth model to use come from your values and your thoughts around your vision for your priorities in continuous improvement in our education system. So what we're looking for in this conversation is you to talk about what information that we would like out of the system, how you would like to utilize it, who are the users or the main users of the growth in that. If you'll go to the next slide. So there's a varying ways to measure growth. And now we've had change in our system, but now we're shifting to growth. So individual student growth. So those two things are different because growth, it follows the students from one year to the next, or 8th grade, possibly to 10th grade. So it reflects those particular students on that assessment to the next assessment. It demonstrates that progress. However, on the other side, then change is year-to-year differences in and the way Kentucky has used it is on those indicators. So we're moving away from looking at the school indicator and how the school moved to the next year on the indicators. So we were using change for example, we've talked about the school quality student success and the climate and safety survey. So change, we looked at how the students in their schools responded to their climate and safety survey and whether or not the next year the school increase their results of the survey. So change in Kentucky was a school measure that we looked at 1 year on an indicator to the next year on an indicator. Whereas growth now that we're going to is looking at the particular student and how they performed on reading and, for example, grade 4, and in reading on the end of the year assessment in grade 5. So a little bit of variation there in the meanings and the application and use of change versus growth. So I just want to make sure that when we're talking about growth, there's a clear understanding of where we are with growth. So individual student growth, again, measures the student's academic progress from 1 year to the next, or even possibly moving from 8th grade to 10th grade. So it's different. It's different than that change because it looks at, growth looks at those assessment results, whereas the change indicator looked at the school results. So there's lots of different models. If you'll go to the next slide, about growth. Growth can be, again, used by a number of different stakeholders. Now, we had the Accountability Thought Partner Group has met a couple of times, and they looked at a number of models of growth that really and they provided a fair amount of values on the individual student growth. And we've really come down to there's 2 models that are being discussed. One is a student growth percentile that is more comparative. So when you have the student growth percentile, you compare a student's growth to that of the other students. And so you get a growth percentile. It's from 0 to 99. And there are cuts along the way that the students would contribute to achieving the student growth percentile that tells you about the student's performance in relation to other students. So for example, in a student growth percentile, if a student had a growth percentile of 70, for example, that tells us that that student made progress during the academic school year. More than 70% of the students that had similar past results. So it's a little bit of a comparison of that. So it's a comparative, it's more of a normative model. Now we've had a bit of history with our student growth percentiles because we have used that in Kentucky. We also looked at what we're calling a value table, but it's a criterion reference measure that compares the student's progress against a standard. So for example, in using this example of a value table, and we've also had experiences with a value table. And for those of us that have been here in education for a while, it's looking at where the student was in 1 year. Let's say it uses our terms of novice, apprentice, proficient, and distinguished, and compares against where the student was in the year before compared to where they are in those categories toward those standards, and if they progressed. So for example, if they made it from novice to apprentice, or we also could subdivide novice into maybe a novice low and novice high and see the progress that they're making toward that standard. So lots of different models, lots of different ways to look at a growth model. And so I'm going to stop there and open it up for some discussions. I want to specifically call on Rosemary, who just raised her hand. So Rosemary, please, I've said a lot there, and I really want to hear your feedback and your comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm curious to know why high schools were not in the past looked at for growth. What was the rationale previously?
I think that it's a new conversation for us to do skip year from 8th grade to 10th grade. That was a suggestion again from the accountability thought partners. We do have a member on here. If Jana Beth, I don't know if you want to, Jana Beth has been part of the discussions deep into those. So Jana Beth, you want to talk about where that came from?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So historically, when Kentucky first did growth, we were looking at year to year and measuring that. And really, this idea of measuring student growth was pretty new across the country. And so that was several years ago when we had growth in the metric beforehand. And one of the reasons high school wasn't a growth measure is, we only assess reading and math at 10th grade. Well, now that growth has evolved and that districts have used it, it's really, according to the technical panel or technical people, and I know KDE will run everything by their technical panel, you are able to do a skip year growth. And the thought partner group really focused in on this idea that if we want to truly measure the progress of students are doing, and with everything going on the redesign of high school, it seemed like looking at how much progress did students make by the time they got to 10th grade, which is the last year we assess reading and math, would be a great idea. And so we proposed this idea of including a skip year growth measure, measuring the progress that students made from 8th grade to 10th grade in reading and math, and including that in the accountability, which would really help high schools focus in on students who had yet to get to proficiency in reading and math.
Thank you. That makes great sense.
Looks like we have a question from Alan as well.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to make sure I've got this right. We already have to have a reading and math test in 10th grade. Is that correct?
Yes.
So this is not a question about adding more tests, but is it a question of reducing tests that we wouldn't have one in 9th grade? Or is that already not there?
It is already not there.
Okay.
So currently we test reading and math at grades 3 through 8 and 10th grade. And so there's not an assessment given to our freshmen.
Right. And this is also then not a question of will we have more tests in reading and math required in high school beyond a 10th grade test.
That's correct.
This is just about how we will do change versus growth in our look at these.
Right. It's the question is utilizing the assessments that are already there, that the students already take, and providing high schools another indicator to provide them metrics that would provide information around how their students are progressing beyond that single proficiency snapshot. So
Jennifer,
again,
if I might add real fast, I think it's important to state that high school was using the change metric that we had in the previous accountability until we got the new moonshot kind of goal of the new design of accountability. And so another reason for putting growth in the high school is without this metric, there's not an improvement kind of metric in there. So when you add the growth metric back for high school, even though it's a skip year, you still are asking high schools to really think about the academic progress of students.
And my last part about my just clarifications, I may have some more questions later, but is one of the differences that the growth automatically makes it a individual thing versus change, which is a school-based thing? Or is there a school-based way that growth is done because of the criterion versus the norm referenced way of looking at growth question?
Hey, Alan, the way I describe it to parents and to families is change was about looking at how my school scored as fourth graders last year compared to how they scored as fourth graders this year. So it's a different group of students. When we move to growth, it's looking at how did the individual student do from one year to the next year. And so it's not taking you back and saying, well, how did last year's fourth graders do compared to this year's fourth graders?
But within the individual student growth, there were two options kind of presented. One, looking at that more on a percentile basis versus one more of a criterion basis compared to against standards, I guess. Is that correct?
Right. And the panel, just to let you know, the panel debated both, and there are pros and cons to each model, and they're pretty much equally used across the nation. The student growth percentile really kind of focuses in on this individual student and making progress with each student. You take the student growth percentiles in some form and you have to apply them to a value table, and you talk about, well, if a student makes this much progress, they're moving up. That's the criteria. So there's a table that says as you make progress, that's the value added.
Okay, thank you. And I may have some questions later, but thank you.
Josh, did you have your hand up as well?
I did. I just wanted to clarify, and before I even ask for clarification, I'm a huge proponent of growth. I felt like the change and, trying to, as an administrator, talk to our staff and students and parents about change, I felt like it was above my education level. I felt like you about needed a doctorate in stats to be able to explain how that affected test scores. And it was always a difficult conversation trying to explain that. So I'm a huge proponent of moving to growth, but I just wanted to make sure I was looking on that indicator. So it would not be a case of that growth affecting each indicator like it does now, but it'll have its own silo that it's worth, whatever 4% or 5%.
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I was wanting to ask. That'll be so much easier and cleaner to talk to staff, students, and parents about.
And we're going to get to, we want your feedback on the weights too here in just a few minutes. So we want to get your feedback on growth and particularly growth at the high schools.
Hey, Sarah has her hand up.
I apologize because I feel like I've read several versions of the system. And so I think I was reading the other day that the cutoffs for each category, novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished, would be set for 6 years. Is that correct?
Those are set until the assessments change. The last change that we had was in 2025 with our science assessment, and we had to have a standard setting in 2025. For 2026, we don't have any assessments changing, so those cut scores will be in place.
Okay, so I'm thinking about my multilingual population. So when we look at the access scores, they are given points on their growth incrementally towards the ultimate goal of exiting. Is that a possibility? Measuring some students come in maybe at the beginning of an apprentice cutoff, but making it to the top end of the apprentice cutoff is a lot of growth compared to what other barriers they might have had during their school year, and then you would get points for that. Is that an option that we could look at or talk about, or is it just with the cohort of students, how they score and moving with that cohort?
And that's really valuable feedback that you're giving with your question, because what I hear you saying is you would like to have a breakdown or a subdivision of those categories. So like, for example, we have novice. We could break it down between novice high, novice low. Even if we look at the category to see if it's big enough to maybe have novice high, novice medium, and novice low, or medium and low. Yes, on that. So that, thank you for that question. I'll take that as feedback that's a direction that you would like to go.
Hey, Alan.
You may be muted.
Okay, I think I'm not now. It was taking like stalling on my mic, and so the reason I asked the questions I asked before is I think I want to not make sure that we don't miss the forest for the trees. One of the concerns I have from a learner's perspective is how much the narrowing of my school learning experience, what I'm learning, if I'm interested and engaged in the learning, and how I get to demonstrate the learning in authentic, real-world ways that are meaningful for me, comes up against the more we give primacy to how we use only multiple choice tests, often and mostly reading and math, to judge whether students or schools or teachers are performing well. So when I look at the lens of this, I understand this is not an asking for another test. So, okay, that's fine. We already have a test in this way. Then which way would actually help preserve high school in particular at trying to have a well-rounded student in all kinds of areas and ways that develop the kinds of knowledge and skills and dispositions that they can demonstrate in ways meaningful for them, and not have the school and the classroom experience narrowed and constricted by a focus on mostly reading and math tests. And
So
so,
Alan, you were exactly where the Kentucky United Relearn Council, I mean, it
Yes.
is right in line with their thoughts, absolutely. And that's the reason the House Bill 257 was such a
Right.
landmark inclusionary statute, because it does include those opportunities for those locally developed indicators of quality that provides the opportunity for vibrant learning experiences where students can engage and have that agency and those real world experiences and those applications and those meaningful just demonstrations. So you are right in line with that, this new statute that should be celebrated for including that in a statewide initiative.
I agree. But we didn't get all of our moonshot.
We did not.
Yeah, and so the little concern I have is how the part that some people may say still is the part that counts. I think they both count. That's why I push for that. I absolutely do.
Right.
And with our students and whatever I do, but I don't want the other part to still overwhelm it. So my question is then, I think I can get on board maybe with the change approach from 8th to 10th not being necessarily that meaningful. But I am concerned, I think, with regard to the percentile approach and what that has been when we're really comparing students to other students in a norm referenced way as a meaningful way forward, and that having a bigger footprint on things than if it is simply a more accurate way of saying, what is it that I'm growing and learning in compared to standards, and how am I showing? So that's where I think this whole question, if we don't weight it too much, and if we also say that it is more of a criterion reference thing, I feel more comfortable with the growth from 8th to 10th if we go that path. If it's just another, hey, I'm still, this label, I don't know how that helps kids or the others, just to see how they compare to each other.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That's very helpful feedback. I really appreciate that.
Hey, this is Jana Beth. Can I bring some clarification to Alan's question real fast in your statement? Alan, the student growth percentiles that we're talking about are all about individual students, and it takes into account where you start. So if as an 8th grader, you had mastered, enough standards to be classified as an apprentice, you're compared to other apprentice students on how much progress you've made. Those would be used in a value table that we're talking about. It's the criterion is really just still saying, okay, you were at apprentice, how far did you move? And so the entire growth metric is about the growth of individual students. And I hear what you're saying about making sure we use other metrics for high school, but at the end of the day, growth allows schools to keep a focus on the students who are still not achieving at Kentucky's goal for all students, which is proficiency. And your last chance to kind of look at that is as a sophomore, especially as we think about redesigning the high school experience. So I just want to be sure that you understand that no matter which we use, if we use a value table or student growth percentages, we're still looking at individual students and saying, did you make progress from one year to the next year?
Thank you for that clarification, Jana Beth. And Alan, just to make sure, it's who's making the progress and how they're and what they're compared to. Are they compared to the other students, or are they compared to the standard?
Yeah, and I think that's what I said. I think I was saying that even if I'm not going as fast as the person beside me in my same group, that is something I can't control as much of. And I don't know how helpful it is to say, what is it that we know about the learner or the learner knows about themselves in that, versus I think they know more and we know more if they're compared to the standards versus to each other when those other variables aren't there. So thanks.
I think Rosemary has had her hand up.
Thank you. Couple of things, getting back to what you've kind of asked about the growth model for high school, I think it is a good thing to really consider, because there are high schools that have such high achieving students that their test scores go up and up. And there's probably a group of students that are kind of being left behind. And this puts some focus back on them to make sure that you're moving all kids along, which I think is really important to think about. And then the other thing I wanted to just share is, you mentioned earlier about the districts, most of them have done the profile of a graduate. I think that kind of a thing takes beyond the academics, and it's the type and soft skills that they want to see their students come out of. And so that kind of puts that accountability on the district to make sure that their students are progressing in a manner that the community has deemed to be what they want to see in the graduates. So, I think those soft skills are kind of covered in that. But at the same time, with the high school issue, I'm concerned about groups of students who are not really being held accountable, or the school's not being accountable for them, that they're growing at least. So I think it's a good idea to kind of do that, because as I said earlier, there are schools that have high achieving students and their scores go up every year. But what about the students who may not be scoring at that level? Are they showing progress?
Thank you for those comments.
Superintendent Tuck has his hand up.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the growth model. I think it allows, as far as a measure that allows schools to receive, I guess, the credit for moving students forward. I wonder, and I think it's been kind of mentioned a little bit, could we split that a little bit, where 70% is based upon growth, for example, and 30% is based on as far as actual readiness of the student and where they are in their education as they're getting close to graduation. So I don't know, just some thoughts there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Let's finish out this growth. And we've got chronic absenteeism that we want to get your feedback on, and then we're going to dive right into those relative weights. So looking forward to that. Any other comments about growth, particularly high school growth? Any other comments?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, Shara, I'm going to turn it over to you, I believe, for chronic absenteeism.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Next slide, please. So in this school year, the 24-25 school year, chronic absenteeism rate was at 25%, according to the Kentucky School Report Card. Now, this is not unique. This is not unique to Kentucky. Over 30 states already include a chronic absenteeism indicator within their accountability system. Under ESSA, chronic absenteeism may fit within that school quality and success indicator category, that bucket that we talked about earlier. It's also important to note that chronic absenteeism includes both excused and unexcused absences when determining the student's status. So we'll go to the next slide. We'll dive a little deeper. So in House Bill 257, it defines now, and I'm going to read that definition to you. You can also see it there on your screen. Chronic absenteeism indicator as student engagement as measured by chronic absenteeism, which shall be defined as a student missing 10% or more of yearly school time for excused or unexcused reasons throughout the school year. Now, what you don't have there on your screen is the federal definition. Now, I have it here, and I'm going to read that to you as well. Chronic absenteeism is typically defined as missing at least 10% of school days or approximately 18 days in a year for any reason, excused or unexcused. So as you see, or as you heard me say, but both of them are fairly similar. But the key difference here between the two definitions is how chronic absenteeism is measured. So the federal definition is based on school days missed, while the state currently is measured in minutes of instructional time missed. So this week, we had a few members of the DPP in, and we had a good discussion with them on chronic absenteeism and gathered their initial feedback on we discussed the definition of chronic absenteeism for that indicator for the Kentucky's for our accountability system. We discussed and the group was in favor of using that federal definition of chronic absenteeism. As that they also expressed support of using a 50-day enrollment period being accountable and having no track back when determining accountability. So I want to stop there and that we've kind of reviewed a little bit, and we've had a lot of discussion on chronic absenteeism, but just want to stop there and get your feedback or comments that you have about this indicator that you may have not already shared, or questions you may have.
Okay, we'll start with Rosemary.
Yeah, you noticed you talked about it being a factor in other states. Can you share a little bit how it's weighted and what kind of impact it has on a score in those other states?
I don't have that information here in front of me. Jennifer, do you, it is used in other states. I don't have in front of me what they, how they weight the chronic absenteeism in other states. It's definitely something we could get for you if we don't have that already available.
Yeah,
Well,
so
Can I jump in? Just because I know some of this.
sure.
So 1% in Ohio, and it goes all the way up to 20%. I think Illinois has a 20% weighted on their accountability. So it's a big variation.
Great, thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. So, I believe we have some others with their hand raised.
Yes, it looks like Sarah has her hand up.
Okay, Sarah, thanks.
I just wanted to say from a school perspective, you know, as someone who monitors attendance a lot, it is really easy when we do it in days and not minutes to break down. I mean, we like to monitor, just like we want teachers to monitor student growth. Like if I'm monitoring my school, it's a lot easier to measure in days. And I would just like to maybe throw out there to think about, you know, you mentioned the 50-day enrollment period, but for student accountability in the past, it's always been 100 days for academic areas. So if they could just match, that would be really great on the school end too.
Okay, so you'd be in favor of it being consistent across the indicators. Now graduation rate is different. It does but the other indicators that we currently have use the 100-day enrollment rule.
It just makes it a little easier for us.
So just one comment around the 100 days is that because you have with the 100 days you have track back.
Right.
So your students that are going in transitioning to different schools, if they're in one place for let's say they're there for 25 days, they transition to another school for another 25 days. And then let's go another school for 25 days. So that'd be what, about 70, less than that. Less than that. So those 3 schools, that student was chronically absent at all 3 of those schools, but then goes into and finds his or her place at a school and is at that school for 100 days and is not chronically absent at that school that they've been at 100 days. They found their place, they've found their people. Then with the 100 days and that track back, that school that has their accountability would be responsible and accountable for those enrollments at those other 3 schools. So we were thinking that may not be an appropriate, fair representation of that school that the student had been not chronically absent at. So we were really trying to look for ways in which we could define a student's enrollment and look for meeting the ESSA as well as demonstrating and accurately reflecting the student in the school they're accountable to. Now, what ESSA says is that they have to be there for at least half of the school year. So the definition, the state definition that we have is that they're there at least, I think, 11 days. So the state definition that uses those minutes that Shara just shared is not going to work for our school accountability system that meets federal requirements. So we have this in Kentucky, this different federal definition that uses half day and whole days. So as you said, tracking in minutes would be fairly difficult, but those half days and whole days we thought would be better. And also then getting that 50 days, which our definition of an accountability full year is that 100 days. So with ESSA, they have to be there at least half a year, and we're defining that as 50 days, so that we would not have to do that track back on that chronic absenteeism.
So just to clarify, so I make sure I understand. So if I have a student for 50 days and they are not chronically absent, and then they move and are at another school where they do become chronically absent, it will not come back to me. It's only for the 50
Correct.
days they're enrolled at my school.
If we
Yes.
use the 50 days, if we use the 50 days, if we use the 100 days and they're chronically absent 50, and then the rest of the time they're in your school and they're not, you would be responsible for that track back of chronically absent.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So
And
no,
what
I don't
we're-
want that.
Yeah, and we thought that using the 50 days would include more students in accountability than in the school's accountability and
Right.
not having that track back.
Okay, yeah.
Any other feedback or questions or thoughts around that that we haven't already touched upon on chronic absenteeism?
I don't see any other hands raised at this moment.
Okay, so now I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer. Oh, no, do we have one? Okay.
Yep. Rosemary.
Yeah, it's been a good discussion. My only additional comment would be is because there are situations where schools don't necessarily have control over absenteeism, I would want for that weight to be low.
Rosemary, that's a perfect transition.
Yeah, because Jennifer's talking about indicator weighting. So yeah, that's perfect. So Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Jessica, if you'll go to the next slide. So in an accountability system, what you have is just not just a technical that determination around, oh, we're going to put this in at this point and this point, but it's really a statement of your priorities. And that those numbers really indicate what your thoughts and your priorities are. So by deciding how much each indicator or measure counts toward the school accountability is effectively saying that these outcomes matter, and they matter in schools, they're encouraged in schools, and they're lifted up to define success of that school and where we want our educational system to be. So it's a commitment that you're making around these measures. So you can see here on the slide that you can see the values because the Kentucky Board of Education will set the weights. They're the ones that provide the final weights toward the regulation. So you can see here what their values are. You can see at elementary, they see reading and math. These are the current weights in the current system. And of course, we're going to lose the climate and safety survey. So you can see, again, the reading and math is a priority at the elementary school. You can see that they value reading and math at the middle school about the same that they do science, social studies, and writing. And now, of course, we're going to lose the writing out of that. You can see that English learner progress and school climate and safety has the value and the priority that is the same across all three levels. At high school, you can see that that post-secondary readiness has a significant amount of value. It's a priority for our board and for our state. So now, there are some boundaries though, and I want to talk about the boundaries as we go forward, because Shara mentioned and I mentioned those buckets of the federal accountability. And Shara, if you'll go to the next slide. Or I'm sorry, Jessica, if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see that at the bottom here, there are federal guidelines that we have to meet. So we're looking at the bottom, it says the combined weight of academic indicators, those are reading and math, the individual student growth, graduation rate, and English language proficiency must be substantially higher than the school quality student success. So right now, Jessica, if you'll go back one. So you can see that at elementary school, it's 51% is reading. And then we used so that's the substantial weight at elementary. So you see the substantial weight at middle school is also in reading. And then at high school, it's the substantial weight from your high school reading and math and your graduation rate. So those two combined, the high school reading and math at 45 and the graduation at 6 is your 51%, which gets you your substantial weight. So there are parameters. There are parameters in that. So Jessica, if you'll go to the next one, the next slide. So we've heard from you already that a couple of times that chronic absenteeism it should be a lower rate. And so we just want to have a conversation here about your relative values and what you would see and you would describe as maybe a low or a medium or high. If you would provide us some feedback in that regard, that we would greatly appreciate that, and we'll take that conversation to others that we're talking through.
It looks like Jana Beth has her hand up.
Thank you. I have one quick clarifying question. Jennifer, social studies is counted where, and science, or they're not counted as the substantial weight? They're on the other side, correct?
So it's a good question, because we've got this individual student growth. So at high school, if we don't put growth in high school, the social studies has to be that other academic indicator. The science and social studies has to be that other academic indicator. And so that would move to it would move to the academic indicator. If we do growth at high school, then the science and social study would move to the school quality student success bucket.
Okay.
So there's some outstanding there.
Right. So my first recommendation, and this is from many DACs that I've spoken with, and I think schools will echo it. If you kind of draw a line between English learners and individual student growth, the last four areas with the change of chronic absenteeism from quality of school climate are exactly the same. And my recommendation is we don't change the weights. And so English learners for all three levels would be 5s. Instead of quality of school climate being 4, we would make chronic absenteeism 4s all the way down, keep post-secondary readiness at 20 and graduation rate at 6. That holds that entire side of this chart. And I think that's important. And now when we move over to reading results, reading and math results, science and social studies results, and individual student growth, my recommendation is that when you look at reading and math results plus individual student growth, they should not be higher than our current percentage for reading and math, because both of those are using the reading and math assessment. So for example, right now in elementary school, we give 51% to reading and math results. I would recommend giving 31% to reading and math results plus 20 to the individual student growth, which still keeps you at 51 around the reading and math test. And then science and social studies would hold at 40. And then that's where I was questioning what to do with the high school and the middle schools, because I think you don't want to overweight growth, taking it away from reading and math. The one thing that I was also trying to do as you move from middle to high, really as you move from elementary, middle to high, is I think you have to emphasize science and social studies as an important area of learning, because at the end of the day, we know those are fields that are critical to student success, and it balances everything out. So I was trying to figure out how you could do 26 points for reading and math at the middle school assessments, and then do 45 for science and social studies, and do another 20 for student growth. That would give reading and math a total of 46. And I was trying to do the same thing for high school, but I'm afraid the clause will catch me there, because I was doing 25 points for reading and math, 30 for the science and social studies, and then another 10 for high school student growth. So that gave me 35 for reading and math and 30 for science and social studies. So I think it's important, and I think this is key. At the end of the day, the individual student growth is based on the reading and math tests. So we don't want to overweight those and overshadow the rest of the accountability system. And I also don't want the middle schools and high schools to not have quality focused attention on science and social studies. And if you overweight reading and math, when we add the growth element, you can run the risk of doubling up classes and kids not getting quality science and social studies instruction.
Very helpful, Janabeth, very helpful. Other members, reaction, thoughts?
Dr. Mason.
I love what you're saying, Jenna-Beth. I just wonder, and if I could just play devil's advocate for a second, if we're going to include the chronic absenteeism, should we weight that slightly more in elementary and progress less through middle and high school? If we're going to increase reading and any kind of state assessment results. I think your original suggestion was to keep it at 4 across the board. I think generally the trend is to have more weight on absenteeism in elementary than in high.
So what the practitioners have said that I have heard already is that in elementary school, the kid has no control or whether or not they're absent or not. At a middle school and high school, you have a little more control about getting yourself up and getting to school. Now we know that's tricky for a middle schooler, but definitely at a high school, the chronic absenteeism issue that we're facing is not it's a student issue. At the elementary, it becomes a parent issue, and that's frustrating to elementary schools to have that in there. And the kid would be at school if they could get themselves to school.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands, Dr. Stafford. Oh, Alan.
Yeah, I in general like the framework that Janabeth has talked about. I'm still concerned about the slight, and I know the strictures below about what is substantially higher mean. I think when we get to high school, I'd like to see more weight on the school quality or student success indicators. And I think from a Reading for Life point of view, graduation and post-secondary readiness should be a little bit weighted more. I know they can't be weighted more than the other, and I know it can't really look like equal because it won't be substantial. But I'd like to see that not just be a 35% total weight, but a 40% total weight in high school and come down to 60% on the other side. And I think I would have that come at the expense of either the reading and math or the individual student growth at the high school, that of the ones that she put out. I think she put out 25, 35, and 10. And I think I would either do 25, 30, and 5 or 20, 30, and 10 on that left side, and maybe try to get to a little higher, maybe 10% for graduation rate and 25% for post-secondary readiness.
So one challenge, I'm sorry.
I just think engagement is very important. And here's the other part I'm going to say about these things. It is using very 1950s style testing, unfortunately, not the demonstration of learning that we're really seeing when we use these state assessment results. The only last thing I will say is that I believe ESSA still allows for, and we didn't choose to do this. I was on things prior to COVID when we were doing this stuff under Commissioner Pruitt, and I was on the Systems and Accountability Workforce team there. And we noted that the federal law said you must use these kinds of tests on the left side, but not only. We could have had more authentic assessments also include, and therefore in our weights, and I'd have something very different because it didn't demand psychometric validity and reliability, but just validity and reliability. We didn't seem to go that way. That was our recommendation, but Commissioner Pruitt didn't go that way. But so my point is, I want to make sure school is measuring more accurately the fuller experience for kids, so kids want to be there and are getting to create ways that they demonstrate their learning that are not just on ABCD tests. So I would love to see, especially in high school, if we could diminish a little bit on that side. And if, as Jenna Beth rightly pointed out, that individual student growth is still using that state test over on the left-hand side. If we can't tweak it a little bit and say, can we have a little bit more about high school being for post-secondary readiness and making sure kids graduate? I think that's important. And I think a 60-40 difference is still substantial.
Superintendent Tuck.
Yeah, I agree with Alan on that. You know, as we look at post-secondary readiness and we look at dual credit and we look at the high school experience, when we look at things like our portrait of a learner and where we're trying to go with everything, and even our local indicators of success, you know, and you look at, you know, Lexile score or Lexiles of the certifications they have to get or the courses they have to complete, those are at 12th grade or higher in most cases. So I think that's a better indication. And you've got students that are truly engaged because they want to go into those careers and stuff too. So I really feel like it would give a better indication of where our high school kids are. And it brings into effect, particularly with graduation rate too. You know, we think about our local communities and we talk about work ready status. A big portion of that and communities being able to get that as well is based upon graduation rate. So connecting that together, I think would be very, very powerful. And I think it would acknowledge the work that our high schools are doing and our career technical fields are doing as well.
Josh.
Just kind of touching on something Mr. Tuck said there, you know, an outlier for post-secondary readiness that we don't see, or we won't see the impact until, you know, really this year, is the number of students taking dual credit classes are going to drop based on the work ready scholarships being drastically reduced. I've got a son who's going to be a senior, and we're working on his schedule, and we're kind of in a holding period, you know, a holding pattern to see how much we're going to be out as a family. And that's going to have an impact on, I mean, we have a lot of kids that take dual credit classes, and it'll have an impact.
Thank you, Josh, for that comment. I was thinking the exact same thing as I was hearing others speak about that. Jana Beth?
Just a point of clarification on that. I'm glad you all raised that, and it is very unfortunate that our dual credit scholarship dropped. But the post-secondary readiness metric requires one class to be post-secondary ready. So that has not been taken completely away. If they completely, and that's any time during high school. And so if they completely remove the dual credit scholarship, then yes, it will be a huge impact. But right now, you can check the box for post-secondary ready if you have been successful in one class. So I just wanted to bring that clarification to this group, because I completely agree that we have penalized students and families by cutting that scholarship. But the number of students who are post-secondary readiness will not be penalized because the requirement is only one class to be proven as ready.
Dr. Stafford, I don't see any other hands up at this
All
point.
right. Well, that was a fantastic conversation. You all are giving us so much good feedback, so much good feedback. Just two more really informational pieces. The first one, I'll turn it over to Shara. There is some flexibilities within ESSA that are of interest of particularly around English language proficiency and including them in accountability. And then I think Melissa's going to finish us out with the House Bill 10. And we've got 5 minutes left.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next slide, please. So we'll try to be thorough but quick here. So this slide here highlights the flexibility that the SSA provides for English learner students who have been enrolled in the U.S. schools for less than 12 months. It is also important to note here that House Bill 257 did not change the English language proficiency indicator. However, KDE is working with an EL thought partner group, as you've heard mentioned here today, comprising of English learner and multilingual educators and specialists to consider options within those federal guidelines. So there's two options. Under both options, students still participate in mathematics and in English language proficiency assessments each year. The flexibility specifically relates to the participation and accountability in the use of the ELA assessments. So option one allows students to be exempt from ELA assessments during that first year in U.S. schools. Option two allows students to take the ELA assessments in that first year. In that option, year one results are reported, but they wouldn't be used in accountability. So that year two results are included, the individual student growth indicator, and then by year three, students are fully included in accountability calculations for both the academic achievement and the growth. So I'll stop there quickly to see if anyone has any thoughts or comments on this.
Shara, just a couple other notes is that at option one and flexibility one is what Kentucky has used in the past. And we get this flexibility through our consolidated ESSA state plan. And so right now we're using exemption one. Exemption two is an availability to us now because we have individual student growth in our accountability system. Because we haven't had that recently, and with the inclusion of individual student growth now into the accountability system, we can pursue this option. And this is an option that was discussed with particular groups as well as legislators, and having interest in this option too, and included growth in House Bill 257 in order to get this possibility for us.
Right.
Right.
All right. So if we'll go to the next slide then. So here you see we are going to be going as we move forward. We're going to continue to engage in key stakeholders, including our thought partner groups and the commissioners' advisory councils, to continue to gather input. We've received a lot of input and feedback today. So we are going to do this to develop a policy to align with House Bill 257. So as you can see, the timeline will support that, support the Kentucky Board of Education establishing an effective implementation approach. So with that, unless somebody else has any other thoughts or feedback, I'll pause and then I'm going to turn it over to Melissa.
Just a note for members of SCAAC, you can see here, we're having the conversation today in preparation for our discussion with the board and at their June meeting, where they're going to give us similar feedback. And we're going to have a very similar discussion that we're having with you now with the local superintendent advisory council and then the board. After those, we'll continue to get feedback. We'll draft then based on the direction, we'll draft a regulation. And in July, you will have the opportunity as members of SCAAC to have input on that regulation. Before the board hears it then in August. So the board will have their first read of the regulation. And again, you'll have that feedback and opportunity to review it in July before they hear it in August. And then the board has decided to have a second read on this regulation. They don't have to have, and their policies don't state that they have to have second reads, where this one is so large and impacts so many schools and across the state. They did want to do their due diligence and have a second read before it goes in, then into the public comment period. So you'll see it again, the regulation, both in July and then again in September at your regular meetings.
All right, then I will turn everything over to Melissa.
Right. Thanks, Shara. And I'm going to speak very briefly about House Bill 10. Several amendments were made to the bill, and a few of those directly affect the structure and operations of our SCAAC group. So we want everyone to be aware of those changes. So as you all know, SCAAC members are appointed by the governor, and House Bill 10 now includes language that requires those appointments to also have Senate confirmation, and that's under KRS 11.160. So moving forward, when the governor makes a SCAAC appointment, a notification letter will also be sent to the Senate within 15 days of that appointment. And the Senate can only act on confirmations while it's in session. So if a new member were appointed, say in June of 2026, that person would not be confirmed until the next legislative session in early 2027. So until the Senate takes that action, the appointed member will continue to serve. But if the Senate ultimately does not confirm the appointment, that individual would no longer be able to continue to serve on the council. And then in addition to the member confirmations by the Senate, the annually elected SCAAC chair is now also subject to Senate confirmation. Our council will elect a chair as usual, and their name will be submitted for the Senate to confirm that selection. And if the Senate declines to confirm the chair, the person may still continue on the council as a member, but they would have to vacate the chair position. And as a council, we would just then elect a new chair. So I do want to note that these confirmation requirements were not limited to SCAAC. The amendments also included similar provisions to several other education-related advisory groups, the Kentucky Board of Education, the Education Professional Standards Board, and the Council on Post-Secondary Education were also included. So very brief update. I'll stop there, see if there's any questions. Looks like we have one. Unfortunately, I have Haley here from our Office of Legal Services, so she can address any questions from a legal perspective if needed.
Dr.
Melissa,
Mason.
Thank you. This is a very quick question. I know everyone wants to leave, but is this a retroactive as well? So the Senate has to approve all the current, no, okay, it's just moving forward.
Great question. And no, it's just moving forward as we understand it. And Haley can jump in if she needs to. But as we understand it, this is for all confirmations moving forward.
That is correct. It is just going to be for any members appointed in the future and then whoever is elected as the next chair.
Thanks, Haley. And that's it. That's all I've got. So I'll hand it back over if there are no other questions to the chair.
Okay, Thank you all so much for those presentations today. There was a lot of information and really good discussion. And I look forward to continuing this line of discussion as we move forward in the process. Our next regularly scheduled SCAAC meeting is July 21st, and I'm sure that Jessica will be sending follow-up invites and information about that to your email. So be aware of that and be watching for that. And if there are no further questions for anyone, I do need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a first. Is there a second?
Second, Alan Young.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or give us a thumbs up.
Aye.
Okay, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.